to get stuff in order, but. Do you want to run this one? Do you want me to do it, Emily?
I feel like you're in a mood to run it. You should do it.
But I'll do it anyways. Cool. So do we have new faces? I think we don't. Just the usual suspects. Thanks for hitting record, Sam. Let's move on to the most exciting part, outstanding spec PRs. Share the right browser window. Cool. Starting from top, I guess. Add mechanisms for platform. I know this is in draft, but
I put this in draft. So there was an ask last time to make a sub-team RFC, which I did. So I'll just direct everyone there for their feedback.
Cool. Thanks for doing that, Natalie. Did you get clarity? There is one discussion there around the whether it should be spec and platform or not. Are we heading in a direction to kind of drive that decision?
I think I haven't read through that conversation with much care yet.
Okay.
But
do you have strong opinions here, or are you just gonna implement the working dirt change?
oh yeah, I can make that change. Sorry,
No, that's fine.
I didn't groom any of these before this meeting. Well,
the same thing here, right?
Yeah, I had previously approved this, but I switched to a request changes just because it looked like we're going to change the other one. And I didn't want us to accidentally be inconsistent.
Cool. Thanks for checking this. I guess for this one, are we expecting, I think there was conversations to have the compat stuff that Sam suggested, and I was reading the Slack discussion. Is that a change in this PR, or are we merging this PR independent of that? Or trying to merge this PR independent of that?
I'm in favor of including it in the spec. But I think we were sort of hung up on
the name itself, like the file
name. Yeah. I put a suggestion there, but I know, Sam, you had some opinions or some concerns based on the requirement that we use a media type.
I think I'll leave a comment there, but generally, if the exact JSON blob we put on the label, if we preserve that, we can just put a media type as vendor. There's a prefix for non-registered media types, that buildpacks IO plus JSON, and that will work. I'll leave that as a suggestion here.
Cool.
The other question I had, really, because the uncertainty around this PR is what's holding us back from like cutting a life cycle. Do we want that to happen, or I don't know that there's like particular urgency around shipping a life cycle, but I'm just pointing that out.
No, that's a good call out. We don't have this tied to a milestone except in the title. Should it be tied to platform 09 here? Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the current plan is fine with me. I think we should move away from the getting stuff in labels because that's a problem. And I'm fine just moving into a file. And so if we can get Sam's suggestion, I would be happy to get this through.
That works great.
And then the last one's project descriptor 02. Do people have feedback on either and the spec stuff or even the release notes? I was probably just going to copy paste this when we cut the release. Do I basically just have to get Joe to approve this? That's the last standing person. I'll go haggle him after this meeting, I guess. Per Emily's point, once I get votes approved, I'm just gonna go do stuff without circling back. I think I would be fine with any of these spec PRs where that's true too. So if you want to ping me Natalie out of band once people approve and you get changes through, I'd be happy to get those things moving so we don't have to talk about them again next week, hopefully. Cool. Spec release planning. We were just talking about platform 09. This is related to those other open PRs you have. And then basically once your set of spec PRs are in, we're good for platform 09.
Yep, I think so. I think platform 09 and build pack 08 are like, they're kind of tied together because of the process specific working directory. And I wanted to know if we could sneak in. I mean, I'm just because we're kind of blocked. Mikey's now working on the providing arguments to build packs via environment variables. I wonder what is the appetite for pulling that into build pack 08, just because it's being worked on.
I'm fine with it. I don't necessarily have a strong preference. It's not backwards breaking. That was what we decided on the RFC, right? So it, I don't think it's like a, I don't know. I'm fine with pulling it in. Unless people are in a rush to get stuff out.
I think it's probably likely to land at the same time as the other stuff that we currently know will be in the next life cycle. So I think Mike created an issue for it because there wasn't one already. That is the issue.
Gotcha. Cool. Sounds good. I assume Emily, with her mic muted, does not have objections, nor any of the other
No objections.
maintainers in the peanut gallery. Cool. Is there anything else we want to bring up for milestone stuff for release planning? Take that as a no. Moving on to our seats. Do we want to pick specific ones we want to talk about, or are we going to go through the gamut of stuff?
I have two that I would love to get on the agenda for working group tomorrow.
Okay.
Actually, there's three that I can remember that we need. I would love to talk about the Docker files RFC.
This evening?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's been also, this is in draft still. I'll check with Juan just to make sure, but Juan has an RFC up for removing the daemon, or not removing the daemon actually, as it's evolved
I
to,
think
but
that's a draft one, isn't it?
it is a draft. So I should probably check with Juan that he actually indeed wants to talk about it at working group. That was the other one I was thinking of. And I remember that we also wanted to get Steven's input on the SBOM for the run image, which
This
is
one?
yeah, that one.
You're not just gonna put one on the spot.
Yeah, I'll check with.
Surprise.
But I remember last time, I think Sam, you also said that it would be good to just have a general discussion because we've had many ideas in office hours, but wanted to air it with a wider audience.
Yeah. Think this is probably something we need to separate a schedule, schedule a separate meeting for. I don't think we can cover this in detail in the typical working group meetings. I think we can first have a group of people who are interested in this, figure out what an appropriate solution is, and then summarize it in the working group. Otherwise, like, we'll just be going in circles. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do we want as an action item or doodle for folks who are interested in to just provide a list of times that are available?
Yeah, I think it's fine to do a doodle or whatever for that.
Which one was that regarding to?
Daemon removal and export.
So we're cutting this from the agenda? Or potential option?
I would say there's still a few open things that I would want to discuss. And it would be nice to get, like, this is a change that will impact app developers. So I would like as many people who are interested in this topic to be part, but I don't want to take up the whole working group discussing just this.
Okay.
So Sam, do you want to facilitate that meeting and scheduling all that? Essentially, it's like a SIG, right?
Sure. I'll be off for the next couple of weeks, so if you want this done ASAP, probably not the right person, but
Well, I think I might be on the same boat, so yeah. Well, maybe we wait. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to do duels for whenever.
I can create a doodle and send it out at least.
Okay.
I was curious about 194. It says it's an FCP.
The subteam RFC?
Yeah. Is that a recent thing?
It's been here
5 days ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
On 179 for Jesse/Natalie, are there, I think there's issues that need to be open specific for this for lifecycle.
And pack too, right? If we want an interface for pack. Ben was going to merge this and then basically got frustrated with the tooling, and I said I would pick it up.
Ben's gonna merge it in. Didn't Ben make most of the tooling?
The original version, but the issue bot stuff. He said something wasn't working, but I don't know what wasn't working. He told me, but I've forgotten. I just have a vague feeling that it wasn't working. I'm wondering if we need to do something different with the issues. But I guess we can just make them.
Okay. So you're taking this over from Ben?
Yeah.
Should probably make creating these issues maybe a standing item for our implementation sync or something like that. I don't know.
I was wondering if we could do something like even more lightweight. Okay, so one of the things I like that we do in Paketo, even though we don't, there's always a problem of people not keeping things up to date, but it's as up to date as the stuff we do, which is that there's issues on the RFC repo itself that basically just tracks the implementation of the RFC. And then from there, you can link out, you can sort of have like a task list that's like a link of other issues, stuff like that. I wonder if it'd be easier if instead of like having to create all these issues for each, we could just create a placeholder on the RFC and then fill it in asynchronously without having to keep updating the RFC itself.
Yeah, I like that. When I merged one the other day, I was like, I had to make sure all the issues got created in the relevant repos, and the tooling helps quite a bit here. And so it's pretty good, but it would be nice to just be able to not block the RFC merge and instead have like an issue, like you said, like a meta issue basically that then we can still use the tooling to like push things into there if we want to, like queue it up in that issue thread or something.
Yeah, I think the only problem with we basically just have to have another commit or whatever that would update the text files, right?
Well, no, I'm saying that text files always reference an issue. And I think is what Emily was saying. And then that issue itself would be dynamic. Like we could still use the same tooling if we want to like update the main comment to link out to the external repos.
Gotcha. And do we just close the issue when the RFC is done?
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful for people too. Instead of like clicking through each one to see where they are, you just have a high level summary. I might just do that with this one. Like there's nothing about that that's against our process. I could just link this to an issue in the RFC repo and then from there link out, and then we'll see if people like it or not. We can always undo it really easily if people don't like it. So
okay. Sounds good to me. Are there other RFC things we want to bring up?
Should we be keeping these final comment ones in this active link, by the way? I'm just wondering, like,
Yeah, just because in theory, during final comment period, you're supposed to be able to comment on it, even though this is like well past
Fair.
final comment period time. Like
a final comment period bot to harass whoever's assigned to be like, please,
merge me, please.
Merge me or take off the label things.
Yeah. Just DDoS their email account. Nice. Like the way you think. I did have this came up on the Heroku side on the Lang stuff, and I want to bring it up. I think Emily and Sam maybe the only people who commented on the prepend delimiter stuff.
The 285.
I think so.
I mean,
were you finishing that thought, Sam?
I can see both sides of it. It's just that, like, if you're appending to variables that the life cycle itself sets, so like package config, path, healthy library path, we know what the delimiters for that should be. Unless you're doing something weird with those values, and for example, you're concatenating paths for some reason, and like using like the slash separators instead of actually putting it on the path variable as a singular entry. I don't know. I'm curious to see what Emily thinks. Again, I think in this case, what they were doing was, instead of putting it in bin, they were putting some other folders on path, and they were not setting the delimiters for that correctly. Is that right?
I think they
yeah, go
were
ahead.
putting it in the bin, I think, is what was confusing me. I'm not against auto setting the correct delimiters. I just feel like the way the spec is intended to be used is you shouldn't be adding
Yeah.
things that are in the layer bin to the path. And that was like the real problem here.
They're already in the path, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for the particular use case, for particular concrete thing, that yes, that's true. But there's definitely, like, if I'm adding a thing to the path prepending, I have to set the delimiter when we know what we want that delimiter to be as a build pack for like common things, like Sam's saying, like things that are already being set by the life cycle, right?
Yeah. It's just,
and so if I use prepend, I also now am required to also use to set the delimiter at the same time. And so are we doing that for consistency across all the variables, or do we want to, for the common stuff, like not force build pack authors who need to prepend something, to also have to know to set the delimiter? I guess is kind of the question, right?
I just don't like exceptions. Like, what happens now if someone uses path and they define a delimiter that's not a colon? Now we have to deal with that in the spec.
Yeah, like, do we have a way to clear delimiters even?
Yeah.
I guess we do. You could just have an empty file, but it gets weird. I guess the reason I don't want to do it mostly is because, Terrence, you're saying for the common stuff, but I feel like this actually is not. It shouldn't be common.
Setting some on path.
Setting path via that specific way they are setting path. Yes, that's not a common thing.
To need to set things on the path.
If you put a bin in your layer, it's already set on the path.
No, I'm just saying, like, but if you have a layer where it isn't in bin because that's where it extracts to, like, you either have to symlink or put it in bin, or you append it to the path, right? Like, I feel like that's not an exceptional use case. Like I need to manipulate the path, right? Like, I need to put tools or whatever where they are, and I either have to link it in myself, which is essentially doing the same thing as prepending by leveraging the fact that there is a special case that lifecycle does for path, or I prepend it to the path, which is also part of the API, right?
It's part of the API, but we don't treat these variables as special cases right now. It's just that if we start treating them as special cases, we'll have to figure out what happens if someone does put a delim file in there with a different value. Or,
I mean, it is a special case already, right? Because we're auto putting bin in the path in the layer. Like, that's
but
different from other variables.
But not using that specific API, right? Like, where you're creating the file called environment variable dot prepend or environment variable dot append. That has just a generic use case that if you want to do anything like that, use it alongside a delim file. I just find it weird that now we'll have to specify that for these specific environment variables, we'll set these delimiters by default. And then we'll also have to also spec out what happens if you specify a DLM files for these variables, because a lot of people will be doing that right now. And what happens if the value in that DLM file is not equal to a colon?
I mean, aren't we already doing something in the sense that if you do nothing here, we are using a delimiter between each layer? Like like if you have multiple layers, we already have a default value, right?
Not using the API that they're using.
Sure, but there already is a default value that lifecycle is enforcing or like doing under the hood.
Yeah, it's the OS one, right? Because
Yeah,
it
it's
probably
the OS
differs
one.
on Windows
Yeah.
versus Linux here.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something that lifecycle is enforcing. I agree. It's just that we don't handle the environment variable set using that specific API in that special case. I'm just saying that we'll have to spec all of that out and figure out how we deal with the edge cases.
I feel like we should be pushing people towards the layer bin API. Like, even if I think one of the reasons is so that you're not putting things on the path that you're not in that layer, setting something on the path that might not be there, right? It's like, if you use the layer bin magic, you only ever get that entry on the path when the executable actually exists. Whereas if you're prepending or appending to the path, you don't have those same guarantees. Not that I think we should stop that latter case from happening if people really want to do something specific, but I feel like we should not be encouraging people to do it the latter way. We should be encouraging them to do it the former way, so you're avoiding edge cases where there are things on the path that aren't in the image.
Isn't bin an edge case? Like when you create a layer, you don't get a bin folder by default. It could be a folder that just doesn't exist, and now you have a path to a thing. Like there's nothing special about bin besides the lifecycle does a thing on path about it. Like
Yeah,
you
but
get an empty folder.
Expect though that it's doing something special. Like if we wanted to create one of those by default and then just have it be empty, I feel like that would also make sense.
the other difference is that you currently can't control what the delimiter is from the lifecycle side. There's a default, and that default cannot be changed. Here, we can inject a default, but we'll also have to deal with what happens when users change that. Because right now that's part of the spec, and we'll be breaking, like if we disallow changing that value for things like path, we'll be breaking that part of the spec right now. Not that anyone should be using it with delimiters apart from colon, but if they are for whatever reason, then yes, we're breaking them.
Well, I think we're over time. I would like to, I guess, maybe just talk to Sam and Emily about this offline. So for topics for tomorrow, I had support Docker files and run image SBOM. Is that good? Cool. Well, I will see everyone tomorrow. Thanks.